We are fighting for an unapologetic movement for economic, social, and racial justice in the United States. I understand the pain of working-class Americans because I have experienced the pain. Congress is too old. They don't have a stake in the game. I'm very hands-on about social media. That's my voice. There is no such thing as talking about class without there being implications of the racial history of the United States. You just can't do it. Working-class Americans want a clear champion, and there is nothing radical about moral clarity in 2018. We have to have a diversity of age represented in Congress, too. I don't like having people do little things for me. Rather than think of it as somewhere to run from, the Bronx is somewhere to invest. I wasn't born to a wealthy or powerful family, mother from Puerto Rico, dad from the South Bronx. I'm used to people kind of knowing me in the community. I want to speak to people directly as much as possible. I know what it's like to access the privilege of a zip code but also be born in one that could have destined me to something else. The way the Queen's Democratic Party machine has worked, they operate on a politics of exclusion. The biggest hurdle that our communities have is cynicism, saying it's a done deal, who cares, there's no point to voting. If we can get somebody to care, it's a huge victory for the movement and the causes we're trying to advance. I'm not running from the left, I'm running from the bottom. I'm running in fierce advocacy for working-class New Yorkers. We know enough to reject the stereotype that people in the Midwest do not care about their brothers and sisters. Democrats should be getting high fives from sanitation truck drivers, that is what should be happening in America. I started my campaign out of a Trader Joe's bag with a bunch of printed palm cards and an idea. I see people like me, who thought someone like me couldn't be in politics, now are saying, oh, wait, I don't need to take money from corporations to run. Maybe I'll run, too. I don't think most of Congress understands how economics works. I believe that every American should have stable, dignified housing, health care, education, that the most very basic needs to sustain modern life should be guaranteed in a moral society. Our democracy is designed to speak truth to power. It's not just that I'm a woman of color running for office. It's the way that I ran. It's the way that my identity formed my methods. I don't think any person in America should die because they are too poor to live. I was born in a place where your zip code determines your destiny. Mentors of mine were under a big pressure to minimize their femininity to make it. I'm not going to do that. That takes away my power. I'm not going to compromise who I am. I think there's a weapon of cynicism to say, protest doesn't work. Organizing doesn't work. Y'all are a bunch of hippies. You know, it doesn't do anything. Because, frankly, it's said out of fear, because it is a potent force for political change. Women like me aren't supposed to run for office. I just hope that more people will ignore the fatalism of the argument that we are beyond repair. We are not beyond repair. We are never beyond repair. Capitalism has not always existed in the world and will not always exist in the world. If you're differently abled, if you're a person of color, if you express your identity in a way that's different from the norm, for whatever reason, there's an implicit bias where people, frankly, sometimes take you less seriously. What the Bronx and Queens needs is Medicare for all, tuition-free public college, a federal jobs guarantee, and criminal justice reform. I wake up every day, and I'm a Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx. Every single day. For me, democratic socialism is about, really, the value for me is that I believe that in a modern, moral, and wealthy society, no person in America should be too poor to live. In Puerto Rico, We continue to see the perpetuation of second-class citizenship in the United States. My mother cleaned homes and drove school buses, and when my family was on the brink of foreclosure, I started bartending and waitressing. What we need to do is lay out a plan and a vision that people can believe in. And getting into Twitter fights with the president is not exactly where we're going to find progress as a nation. I do think that we have to have a secure border. We need to make sure that people are, in fact, documented. But that doesn't mean that we threaten people's lives. We have a political culture of intimidation, of favoring, of patronage, and of fear, and that is no way for a community to be governed. It's disingenuous to pretend the sources of our money don't impact the policy we write. You just can't serve two masters. When people feel like they are being spoken directly to, I do feel like they'll do things like turn out in an off-year, mid-year primary. When people feel like they are being spoken directly to, I do feel like they'll do things like turn out in an off-year, mid-year primary. It is unacceptable to be disrespectful of Congressman Crowley. He's done some phenomenal work for the Bronx and Queens. Campaigns are so much more expensive than people think they are. Just to keep the lights on is several $1,000s a month. The Republicans galvanize their base by inciting a lot of fear. They operate on a lot of myth-making. So we have to have something compelling. We shouldn't be afraid to be bold. It's really scary, or it's easy to generate fear around an idea or around an ism when you don't provide any substance to it. People try to identify who is the most likely person to turn out, and what we did is that we changed who turns out. And that changes the whole electorate. I knew that our community needed a very clear voice. And I think we deserved representation that rejected lobbyist funds and put our voters and our community first. I felt like the only way to effectively run for office is if you had access to a lot of wealth, high social influence, a lot of dynastic power, and I knew that I didn't have any of those things. Public schools in the late 80s and early 90s were a total mess. We felt that if I was going to have a good educational option in my life, I would have to go to a public school district that actually served its children. What I see is that the Democratic Party takes working class communities for granted, they take people of color for granted, and they just assume that we're going to turn out no matter how bland or half-stepping these proposals are. I was born to a dad who was born in the South Bronx while the Bronx was burning, while landlords were committing arson to their own buildings. We have to stick to the message, what are we proposing to the American people? Not, what are we fighting against?